Hello! This video is about the practical side of things. There'll be altars, Natron, and ritual clothing. I managed to stay pretty close to script on this one, so I don't have much to add up front. Let's go ahead and get into the talk.
So enough about abstracts. Let's talk about altars. So altars are nice, but they're not necessary. If you are in a position where you cannot safely be out enough to have something as obvious as an altar, you don't have to have one in order to practice Kemetic religion. They're kind of necessary if you want to be a priest, but other than that, I feel like for non-priestly folks, altars are a very nice reminder to us of the Netjeru's presence in our lives. And also, I feel that they might, and this is purely personal speculation, they might function also on an amuletic level and kind of pool the energies of that deity in your domestic space. But if you can't safely have an altar, you can substitute something else for a focus, like a candle works well, I find. You can use a small travel altar. This on the slide here is my travel shrine. It's just a wooden dollhouse wardrobe that I painted gold, and I painted a little scene inside and put a little bronze Bastet cat inside. I'll have it out later if anybody wants to come up and look at it. You can assemble and disassemble an altar as needed, or just use nothing at all. What did domestic altars look like? In ancient Egypt, we don't really know a whole lot about domestic religion, unfortunately. Early Egyptology was primarily focused on nobility and kings. They were all about the gold, and I mean, I can't really blame them for that. I do wish that they had maybe paid more attention to the common people, because that would be more useful information for me, since I am neither a king nor nobility. But we do have some preserved villages, and from what is left, we think that there were niches in the wall which probably held statues. There's also these things called box beds, which is basically like a kind of roughly square raised platform, and they had like little ceremonial non-functional steps that led up to them. We're not entirely certain what they were used for. Some people think they might have been altars, some people say not. So without a whole lot of guidance from the ancient world, do what feels right to you. It can be very personal. You might have a very minimalist altar. You might have a very maximalist altar. This is my maximalist altar from San Francisco. This is what my altar looked like when I started out as a Kemetic. I made a lot of offerings that I didn't have much use for personally. I offered them just because I thought the gods might like them, and so they kind of stacked up around my altar. And if this doesn't look bad to you, that is because this is right after I moved, when everything was freshly dusted and just put together, and it got more complex afterwards as time went on. But it looks very nice, and there are a few things which I feel are very helpful. I'm tempted to say essential for an altar, and the rest of it is flavor. So you can add as much or as little as you want. These days, I keep a very minimalist altar. So what are those basic things? I would say A representation of the god or goddess that you would like to honor is a good idea if you can find one. You can use a statue, which you can either buy, you can commission it, or you can make it. You can use a two-dimensional picture, use a card from an oracle deck, print one from the internet, copy one from a book, draw it yourself. I find that the items that we make ourselves, even though they might not be the most professional looking things, it's from the heart. That is an incredible offering. You are literally contributing to the physical presence of that deity in this world. And I think that's a pretty amazing thing. There's the naus, which is a cabinet-like enclosure. That's the square thing that the cats are sitting on in the picture. It protects the image. It keeps it clean, keeps dust off of it, keeps the image from being knocked over and broken. Another very helpful thing is that it's also cat-proof. I had 2 cats at home, and this is a very useful feature. This one in this picture is an old VHS cabinet that I repurposed. You can repurpose an old floor cabinet, thrift one. The one that I'm going to be using tonight, it's over there in the south end of the room, that is a medicine cabinet. It's meant to be hung on the wall. I just did away with the back that they sent with that one and had some, I think it's oak, a very thin oak board cut over at Lowe's, and I painted it gold because I like gold. You can also, you can have them custom made. That's going to be a pricey option. You can use, for your travel shrine, you can use the dollhouse wardrobe like I did. Maybe even in like an Altoids tin. Or if you don't have a naus, you can't find one, you can't afford one, you can substitute a veil of cloth. And my temple, which has a naus, has several, has done this on occasion when this was just more convenient for us to do. You'll see a picture of it later on in the presentation. So you will also want to have a candle of some sort. I like to light the candle when the shrine is in use. I like to use tea lights because they're a low profile, does not block view of the image, and it's also less likely to set my sleeve on fire if I have to reach over it to do something. I like to use white unscented tea lights, but you can use whatever color feels appropriate to your purposes and your deity. You can use LED candles if you can't have or don't want fire. They make some very realistic ones these days, and I will be using an LED candle today because the hive does not allow fire. I had some very fun obstacles to overcome for ritual here. You will also want some sort of incense censer sort of setup. I recommend using loose incense, the kind that you burn on a briquette, because stick and cone incense, especially the kind from India, can sometimes use cow dung as a adhesive base that helps. It just helps to keep the cone or the stick in its shape. And that makes a lot of sense in India, where the cow is sacred. But in Kemetic religion, we usually try to avoid offering things that have feces in them or urine. You can substitute. So if you're looking for scents to use, frankincense, myrrh are common. There is a blend of incense which the Greeks called kefi and the ancient Egyptians called kapet. And we actually have recipes for kapet, which were carved into the temple wall. So we know how to make it. It's amazing. I have some. But you can use whatever you want. Lightning is not going to strike you if you want to burn some jasmine incense. You could also use an oil diffuser. I recommend essential oils because they just tend to be purer. Perfume oils. I hear that this is less common now, but perfumes in the past have contained urea or urine sometimes. So I tend to prefer essential oils. If you can't use any of that, you can use fragrant flowers. Flowers is what I'm going to be using tonight because I'm also not allowed to use strong scents at the hive. Yeah, this is fun. So you'll want a small bowl for water libations, maybe a cup for a water offering, a plate for a food offering. And now we're starting to get into like not not necessary, but would be nice. Maybe a water pitcher for pouring water, extra cups for beer, wine, or milk, small bowl for fruit offerings, a pair of bowls to hold water and natron for purification, maybe. And speaking of purification, natron. I passed out some natron at the beginning of the presentation. This is a naturally occurring salt in Egypt. My natron does not come from Egypt because it is illegal to take it out of Egypt. So we make our own. It's essentially a mix of baking soda and salt. It is our weapon of choice for ritual purification. And purification, by the way, does not necessarily mean that you or whatever it is that you're purifying is dirty and bad and gross. I understand ritual purity concerns as simply being that something about this is detrimental to the ritual purposes. So my friend and teacher, Richard Reedy, used to say, when you go out walking on the road, you're going to pick up road dust. So when you go out walking in life, you're going to pick up scattered energies too. You just want to purify yourself to get rid of those scattered energies so that they don't um, affect the Heka, the magic that you'll be doing in your ritual, because Egyptian ritual involves a lot of magic. And also, purification in an Egyptian sense seems to include a concept of rejuvenation, uh, renewal, new life. And so you'll see images like this one that I have on my slide, where Heru and Sekhmet are pouring water over this man, and the water is coming out as little ankh droplets of life. So there is a recipe on how to make natron in the back of your information packet. If you are attending online, I promise I will upload a link to the information packet from wherever I invited you from so that you can have that as well. I usually avoid using sea salt. It's a personal choice. I feel that the natron, I don't know that the natron in Egypt, in the wadis in Egypt, comes from the sea, and I feel that the sea has a very specific energy to it. And also the sea often has things like microplastics in it. But my good friend Achilles pointed out that we have polluted all parts of our world, so it is a personal choice, as so many things are. If you don't have time to make a batch of natron and if you need to be purified very quickly, uh, I had a teacher who used to make what she called lazy natron, and that was just mixing equal parts baking soda and table salt in a jar and shaking it up. But if you can add that water and boil it, that is preferable. So how do you use this stuff? I like to add a few grains to a pre-ritual bath. I usually use 4 grains to an entire, 4 grains to an entire 1 cup. 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 4 grains to an ent bathtub full of water, or I will take those 4 grains and I'll put it in a bowl of water, which I will pray over. I have prayers that I say over my purification water. And then when I get into the shower, I pour it over my head. And I personally feel that any water that touches that Natron water is then going to also be purified and gain purification properties. It's kind of like a magical contagion sort of thing. And so then it just spreads over your entire body and it purifies all of you. But if you don't have time for a bath, you can just wash your hands and rinse your mouth. That is perfectly fine. You can use it to sprinkle on your fellow ritual attendants as they enter ritual space. You can chew a pellet to purify your mouth. It is very salty. It will purify anything, space, people, tools. We use it on everything. But do be careful of gold leaf or any non-water friendly surfaces. I heard of a lady who was doing pet sitting for somebody, and she wanted a way to purify her ritual space really quickly while she did ritual over there. And she mixed up some very dilute natron water and put it in a spritzer bottle, and just kind of sprayed herself down before a ritual. I thought that was a fantastic idea. So it doesn't need to be concentrated. Yeah, I use it to wipe down my altar, my tools. I will sometimes add a little bit of frankincense hydrosol to the mixture to make it smell nice. Ritual clothing, another thing, nice to have, not really necessary. But I find that it contributes to a ritual frame of mind. I have here some qualities which I feel are important. I had them listed more or less in descending order of importance. You want to be clean. If that's all that you can do, then that is the most important thing. Clean street clothes, and I am going to be doing ritual later on today in clean street clothes. That is perfectly fine. But think of approaching the Nigeru as this is someone you love, but they're also someone who's very important. They're very respectable, and so you want to be respectable too. You want to be presentable. If you are really stinky and dirty, maybe you need to take a bath or change your clothes before you go in and say hello. Go into their home, their space. No wool. Now, I was taught no wool or leather. And if you buy any of Richard Reedy's books, he was my teacher, he says no wool or leather. And I did some research on this in preparation for this talk because I wanted to make sure that I was giving you guys accurate information. And I was able to trace the prohibition on leather to a teaching by a man who was very influential in the Kemetic movement when I was first learning. He founded and taught at a temple called Aket Hathor, and he had read Herodotus's account that wool was taboo in ancient Egypt and Herodotus says it's because it comes from an animal. And so this man had understandably assumed that since leather came from an animal, it would also be taboo, and was teaching that leather was also taboo. But Herodotus didn't actually say anything about leather. And when I pointed this out to him, he was very surprised. And he was like, yeah, I guess I made that assumption. But the thing is that there's a couple of things about this. One, there was a class of priests called the Sem priests who wore leopard pelts as a symbol of their office. Obviously, that comes from an animal. The feather of Ma'at is often represented by an ostrich feather that comes from an animal. Meat is a very common offering for the gods, comes from an animal. I don't think that this is the whole story. And also, Herodotus, these ancient historians, They didn't have any kind of professional education on ancient Egyptian culture or religion. They just wrote down what they saw. So basically, what we have are tourist accounts. Um, and I don't know where Herodotus saw this, what context he saw it in. I don't know really anything about it, but I do know that there is an inscription in the Temple of Esna that says that no one is to enter while wearing the fur of the sheep around them. So apparently there was some kind of taboo against wool at the Temple of Esna. The god at the Temple of Esna is Khnum, who has a ram's head. Now, I am inclined to wonder, does that have anything to do with it? Is this a local taboo? Was this a universal taboo? Or was this just something that was done at Esna? Did Herodotus go to Esna? I don't know. I can't say. But I feel like since it is so easy to avoid wool, I'm just playing it safe rather than sorry while I try to gather more information. So if anybody forewent wool to come here tonight, thank you very much for humoring me. White is also a good color for ritual clothing because it is the color of purity. But I've also done ritual with Kemetics who have had um, clothing of other colors too. So, I mean, that's not necessarily a mandatory. Made of natural fibers is my personal preference. I find that cotton and linen are good and usually pretty well available. Um, if you are looking for a ritual robe, there's something called a galabaya or a kaftan, and both of those are really good for Kemetic robes. Those robes that are in the picture there, those are two of my ritual robes.
So I hope you were able to stay with me through all of that. It was a lot of information, a lot of lists. But what I really want to know is, what does your practice look like? Do you have an altar? Do you wear special clothing? Do you do anything special for purifications? Um, I don't know if YouTube allows videos in the comments, but if you figure out a way to do it, I want to see. I want to see your altar. I want to see your ritual clothing. Um, I don't know. I hope somebody figures it out because I'm very curious. And that's all I got for this one. So the next one, I believe, is going to be on practices and offerings. So I will see you again whenever I get the next video up. All right. Goodbye.